This is a war on religion. This is a war on the children. They give you the cure with the sickness. This is a war on tradition. This is a war on religion. This is a war on the children. They give you the cure with the sickness. This is a war. This is a war.
Hello, this is Dr. Kevin Cruz with the Truth, Faith, and Action Alliance. We want to thank you for taking your time to hear about the war on our children. By the way, you're in for a treat today because our speaker promises to be one of the most explosive in our series because he was an insider in the LGBTQ movement and has since transitioned back. But before we move forward, I want us to remember that addressing gender identity issues is difficult because there are two people groups involved. First, we have the corrupt people who are instigating the deception. Unfortunately, they've targeted the population that is hurting the most, our children. The story that you will hear today from Walt explains the pain in vivid detail because Walt pulls no punches as he explains how trauma from his childhood set him up to believe the lie of transitioning. But the strongest message you will hear today is a message of hope because Jesus has never stopped reaching the LGBTQ community, and neither should we. Since becoming a Christian, Walt has gone on to be the founder of SexChangeRegret.com. In fact, Walt has been helping people detransition back to their original sex for many years now. So without further ado, here is Walt Heyer.
Do you think you'd be happier as a boy?
My mom would never allow it. That's abuse.
Oh, you can't hear me cry. See my dreams all die from where you're standing on your own.
Anybody who's gone through this, it's the same thing.
Sweetie, please.
No. I need you to leave. Evie, no.
Where are you getting this from?
We're just masquerading.
When did parents become enemy number one?
This is all coming from the top, the major corporations, governments, politicians.
You have a pipeline that's also in the education system.
So today we're going to talk a bit about genders. We are here to support you.
I feel like I couldn't breathe. My aching body fell to the floor.
I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of parents. Our stories are all the same.
They told my parents if I wasn't allowed to transition, I would be at risk of suicide.
This was a group where they basically gathered vulnerable children and taught them that it was us against them.
Would you rather have a dead daughter
Or a living son?
That question is asked over and over again, and therapists are trained to say that.
You caused my heart to bleed. You still hold me a reason. 'Cause I can't figure out why.
It's destroyed my health.
Looking back, it made me feel even more hopeless.
And then I felt down, I felt tired, I felt exhausted.
Life after my body shakes on its own uncontrollably.
I'll never be the same.
I was allowed to destroy my body.
They never talk about how much harm is being caused.
You know Joshua from Club? He says our closest family are often our worst enemies.
It's separating kids from their parents.
The state has decided that Evan should stay at a group home for now, for his safety.
You can't hear me cry. See my dreams all die from where you're standing on your own.
We miss you so much, Evie.
Leave him alone.
Like, this is the most important question. Why are they all doing this?
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Yeah. Wow. Okay, I can go home now. Yeah, that was pretty cool. It's exciting to be here. It's an honor to be here, and this is such an important topic. And they really need to change the word transgender to destroyed lives. we need to take back the language, you know. The fact of the matter is, you can identify as a transgender, but nobody's ever transitioned, have they? It's not possible for a man to become a woman or a woman to become a man. They can identify as a female or a male, but they can't become one. And who in the heck knows what a female feels like anyway? Right? Come on, that's pretty funny. So, my journey started in 1944. And Los Angeles, California, Figueroa, street that runs all the way through LA. And it was a time when there was a lot of turmoil in the world. And my mom was a young mom. She'd already had my brother. And when I came along, she was pregnant with me when she was 20, and she already had one other son, and my parents didn't have a lot of money. And the fact of the matter is, my mom, she didn't hate me, she just didn't want another child. I was the child that she didn't want. And in the entire time of my mom's 86 years, I never heard her tell me that she loved me. And the things that happened early in life, and I tell you these stories because I'll kind of wrap around that when we get back to it, but when I was 2 or 3 years old, she used to pick me up. She's told the story. This is not my remembering. She told the story about her picking me up so my feet dangled above the floor, and she would hit me with a frying pan. My mom was physically abusive. She had a troubled childhood herself. Her dad ran away from home because he was an alcoholic. Her and her brother, when he was 15, I think, and she was 10 or so, were by themselves in a trailer park in Garland, Texas, with no parents. The neighbors raised him. So she, troubled people trouble people. And so she was acting out her own frustration from her own life. And so her mother was my babysitter. And so when Dad would drop me off at Grandma's house, and Grandma was a seamstress, Grandma decided to make me a purple chiffon dress when I was 4 years old. And she put me in that dress and said, "Now this is our little secret." And she dressed me up in the female clothing and told me how cute I was, how wonderful I was. And she never said, "Man, you make a real good boy," or "You look cool," or she never said that. Why is that important? We've heard a lot of people talk about the messaging. What are we telling our kids? What are we telling them? It's important to telegraph to our kids who they are. We don't tell them there's something else. And that impacted me. Every time I was over there, she was putting me in the purple dress. I got to where I enjoyed it. Because why? Tell me who here doesn't like to be affirmed and told how cute and wonderful you are? And it was the only way I could get it. Do we understand that? So who are we affirming and who are we supporting? Something real or something not real? And so as a result of that purple dress, I got so accustomed to hearing that affirmation and all that wonderful feeling of being loved that I wasn't getting from my mother. That was the only way I could get it as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old. This went on for about 2.5 years. To the point to where I got so accustomed to it, the little secret, I took the purple dress and put it in a brown paper bag when my dad picked me up and took it home. Because I wanted to secretly dress again, so I could remember the good sounds from Grandma's voice that I wasn't getting from my mom. My mom found the purple dress in my dresser drawer, and she said, "Where did you get this?" I said, "Well, Grandma made it." Grandma made it? And then my dad heard that. Now, I don't know about you, but my dad got a little upset at what his mother-in-law was doing to his boy, right? In secret. So my dad, and we're talking 1946. There's no words for this, right? We haven't got that far yet in the story. In his frustration, he decided that he was going to make me a boy by hitting me with a hardwood floor plank for discipline and criticize me, man me up. He was like the guy that was putting an iron, in the fire, and then you take a hammer and beat it the way you want it. A blacksmith. He was going to blacksmith me into a boy. Well, what was he really doing? More abuse. More abuse. And the next episode in the story was that his adopted brother, Uncle Fred, who was a teenager, and Uncle Fred was adopted because he was a troubled kid. And he decided, because I was wearing a purple dress, because everybody knew it by then, the secret was out, that he decided that I was fair game to be sexually molested. So I'm not even 10 years old, not even 9. I've been hit by my mother, cross-dressed by my grandma, hit by my dad, and sexually abused by my uncle. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that is not the best way to start life. Can we agree on that? But you know what's interesting? We laugh, right? They're doing it to kids every day. This is not a laughing matter. No child should be cross-dressed by anybody at any time for any reason for the purpose of telling them they can change genders and become someone else. That is child abuse, absolute, pure, simple child abuse. They want to take kids away from parents who don't affirm them. We should take parents away from kids who they don't support as who they are. We got it backwards. So in my view of having gone through this process, to me, there is no such thing as a transgender. The fact of the matter is nobody's ever transitioned. And in the thousands of people that I've worked with over the last nearly 14 years, I found that it's not even about gender dysphoria. Let's pause for just a second. Being hit by my mom, cross-dressed by my grandma, hit by my dad, and sexually abused by my uncle, what is the term for that? Trauma and child abuse. That's not gender dysphoria. We got the labels wrong. They want you to believe that's gender dysphoria. It's not. Today, when I work with people and they write me, I always say, just answer me one question. What caused you to not like who you are? And you know what? They have an answer. Because someone did something to them. They were physically abused. They were emotionally abused. They were abandoned. Something happened. Now, some of them admit to being addicted to pornography from the internet. Or some of them will admit that they did it because they're in a group of friends at school and they all did it together. This is where the social contagion part comes in. One does it, another does it, another does it. This stuff is spread faster than COVID, right? And it's because people... I was in California. I didn't stay long, but I was speaking at a group, and one of the teachers there came up and stood in front of me, and he says, I have children in school who are afraid to not identify as trans. They're afraid. They're not trans. I worked consecutively with 4 girls almost in 1 week period of time who identified as trans, and after talking through their parents to the kids, they all admitted they weren't trans. They were doing it because their friends were doing it. And they all desisted. One of them was 10, one was 14, and 2 were 15. So I went on with my life, struggling, trying to sleep at night. My older brother, when his head hit the pillow, he was asleep. I laid there and wept because I couldn't figure out why things were going so badly. I remember laying in bed and I could hear the train yard because we didn't live that far from downtown LA, and I could hear the trains on the train track connecting. You know that sound, clunk, when they, and that's what I heard at night. I listened to tires in the road and airplanes in the sky because I couldn't figure out what was going on. Where was this going? By the time I was 13, I was so troubled and so confused by the events of my life, I started identifying as Crystal West, not to anyone but myself. And it was my way of trying to cope with whatever this was that was going on. And then I went on into school. I ran track. I was in football. But there was never a day that purple dress wasn't up in my head, that there's something wrong. That there's something wrong with me. I'm not quite right. And actually, that was true. Because what she did, Grandma, Dad, Mom, and Uncle, was so deeply affected me and traumatized me, I didn't know who I was. But I tried to work through it as best I could without any information. By 1955, there was Christine Jorgensen made the headlines, transsexual. Many of you wouldn't remember it because it was a long time ago. I'm an old man. Of course, I don't have to tell you that. You can see it. I mean, I got $1 million body right now. It's just all in loose change. But so in 1955, Christine Jorgensen came across, and I looked at that and I said, well, that must be who I am. So that was my connection. That was the first time I'd attached it to a word. And so then I kind of, like a barnacle to a boat, I latched onto that because there was nothing else. There was the void. And so as I went through this process and trying to deal with it, I never had issues with same-sex attraction or homosexuality. It was not my thing. It never happened. I was just somebody who was badly broken by early life. Badly broken. And I didn't know how to fix it. I got married. I had children. 2 children. I studied in school, and I became an associate design engineer on the Apollo space missions. I went from there to American Honda Motor Company, and I was one of the 3 or 4 people that helped develop the Acura division. But I was struggling by that time with alcohol and drug addiction, cocaine. Why? Because of being hit by my mom, cross-dressed by my grandma, hit by my dad, and sexually abused by my uncle. I was still confused. I was just going through life, trying to cope as best I could. I wasn't doing a good job. I was trying to numb the pain of my childhood that had never been resolved. I lost my childhood. It was destroyed. Why am I up here today? I do not want another child anywhere in this country to lose their childhood. It's insane, and I'm passionate about it. I'm 83 years old, and I'm still talking about what happened to me before I was 10 years old. So don't tell me that it's benign and no big deal. We're destroying an entire generation of children, and it must come to an end. And we have the power to do it. We got Jesus. But we need to become informed. I got married, had children, had a career, but the struggle, I finally ended up going to a gender therapist. Don't ever do that. I went to the guy Paul Walker, who wrote the standards of care that are in existence today. He was the original draft person for the standards of care. He was a world expert. I was making good money. I could go to the best. That's what I did. I went into his office on Union Street in San Francisco, told him about my childhood. He said, well, you need hormones and surgery. That's the fix. I'm not brilliant, but I'm not completely devoid of some gray matter. And I said, well, that sounds really bizarre. Well, this is the only way you can resolve this. Without any Walt Heyer out there yelling and screaming like I'm doing now, saying, don't do this, the bridge is out. That was all there was. So I did it. 41 years ago, this month, I was in Trinidad, Colorado, and underwent the full regimen of reassignment surgery. Lived 8 years identifying as Laura Jensen. After about 7 years, I went back to the therapist and I said, tell me something. I've been doing all this stuff, going through this. I did all the regimens, the hormones, the whole 9 yards, just like you say to do. How long does it take for this to work? You know, the therapist says you need to give it more time. I said, okay, how much time do I need to give it? There's no answer, because there is no answer. The reason there's no answer is hormones and surgery are not effective in resolving trauma and child abuse. Hormones and surgery are not effective for curing people who are addicted to pornography. Hormones and surgery are not going to cure anything. This is the biggest medical fraud that I can ever think of. The people don't even change genders. When I was getting my birth certificate renewed, I asked Dr. Walker and Dr. Biber, who did the surgery, to tell Superior Court, because I had my birth record got changed from Walt Heyer, male, to Laura Jensen, female. I wanted to restore it. So I said, fill out an affidavit and tell the court that hormones and surgery actually effectively changed my gender, because there was some discussion about the fact that I may need to have, some radical surgery to go back, and therapy. See, then they wanted extensive therapy to go back because you're nuts if you're going back, but you're not nuts if you're going for it. Is that crazy, huh? Well, you need about 5 years of therapy to get over being so crazy. Well, I should have had 5 years of surgery before they sliced me up like a sushi chef. Right? So, we're in this zone where I was struggling so much. I remember writing a poem, and I took it from Dietrich Bonhoeffer when he was in prison. Because I remember when I read Dietrich Bonhoeffer's poem about when he was in prison, I said to myself, I'm in a prison. I'm in a prison they've attached a name to called transgenderism. I didn't want my identity to be transgenderism. I was getting to the point where I wanted my identity in the Lord Jesus Christ. It was a slow crawl. But I wrote this poem and I talked about reaching out. Are you there? I'm reaching out to you. Are you there? Can you hear me? Please hear me. I'm broken, so badly broken by my past. Are you there? Can you help me? The poem I wrote real quickly at breakfast one morning, got published in Omni magazine in 1988 under the name Laura Jensen. That was my first call out to Jesus. By 1990, I was starting my recovery from alcohol and drugs. Next month, I'll have 38 years clean and sober. That's why I look so good today. Is my wife here? Casey? My smoking hot trophy wife. Where is she? Hey! I mean, she knew what a tall, dark, handsome guy looked like. Well, maybe not tall and dark and maybe not handsome, but we're having a good time. Next month, 27 years married, so, all right. But after I did that poem and I'm going through my recovery and alcoholism, many people know what a fourth step is in AA, and I was going to a therapist to go through my fourth step. And I had 21 lined pages written about all the things, my resentments and all the stuff I'd gone through. They said, clear the junk out of the trunk and give it away. And that's what I was doing that day. And I spent about 3 hours with the therapist in his office in California. And we went over the things, and each one of them, we prayed about them briefly. Okay, we pray for that one, pray for this one, pray for that. And what I was doing was I was confessing I was wrong. I was admitting I was wrong. I admit that I was a sinner. I admit that I was broken. I didn't, during that 3 hours, didn't blame anybody. I took full responsibility for my life. Full responsibility. And when we were done, the therapist said, let's go out in the parking lot. And he said, I got something I want to do. So we walked outside, and he took the yellow line paper, and he took a match standing in the parking lot, and he put a light to the paper, and it started burning. A pretty good little fire going. And it just was consumed, and it just turned into dust and took off. And it was a very cathartic moment. And so what happened was, he says, come on back into my office. He said, we need to pray. Now, don't judge me on this, okay? I mean, we got a good relationship now. I don't want it to go bad on this one, but this guy prays for a long time. And I thought I was going to miss the next 2 days if I sat down and started praying with him. So I was a little reluctant to go back and pray with him, but I said, okay, we'll do it. And I was kind of like, okay. So we sat down, and he's across from me, and he starts praying. Yeah, he's praying. Oh, yeah, baby. And he is still praying. And he's praying. And there was a point that came when I couldn't hear him anymore. I looked up, and the Lord Jesus Christ was coming down with his arms stretched out. And he was coming down, and I looked at his trajectory, and I looked in front of me, and there was a little baby. I looked at that baby, and I said, that baby's me. He's coming for me as a baby. He picked the baby up, the Lord did, and he turned and looked me in the eye. And he said, you are now safe with me forever. That was the day that I was redeemed and restored to Jesus Christ, so I could come and tell you today about Jesus Christ as the answer. I don't care what's going on.
One night I remember having a dream that I was a boy. I felt so happy after waking up from that dream. It just felt like I was excited to be alive. And then I got up and went and looked in the mirror, and just that happiness was like crushed.
Based on the information that I had, that medical transition is by far the best treatment, and that you are at risk for suicide if you don't follow that path. I thought I only really had one path that I could take.
I became alarmed back in 2019 after I realized I was seeing more kids with gender dysphoria, and every single one I referred to the gender clinic was being transitioned.
So it's often said that puberty blockers are reversible, but the majority of children who are started on puberty blockers, over 95%, go on to take cross-sex hormones. Puberty blockers cannot be considered a standalone intervention.
If it worked, I'd be very open to it. It's like putting diesel in the petrol tank.
There was a study looking at the Swedish population of those who had transitioned that found that those who had transitioned had suicide rates 19 times higher than population-matched controls.
Puberty blockers followed by cross-sex hormones. The fact they're being offered outside of clinical trials, despite the fact there's so much unknown about long-term risk, is a scandal in and of itself.
It's up to us on the left to walk this back. I want liberals to make room for gender diversity, and that includes masculine girls and feminine boys, without telling them that they need to leave their sex category because they are different.
Like I said, I have to now live with what I've done. These doctors and therapists put me through this. They had no reason to, except for the fact that I said it.
On behalf of our alliance, I want to thank Walt Heyer for sharing his story. We know that it will bring healing to those who have been hurt by the lies surrounding the gender identity movement. I believe Walt can also help us realize that when we stand up against this evil, we are standing up for the children who are oppressed and abused. Unfortunately, there is still a massive surge in the number of people involved in the mutilation of our children. In just a few years, we've gone from what we mentioned before of just a few percent to now 40% of Gen Z that identifies as LGBTQ. Since 2017, we've seen the diagnosis of youth with gender dysphoria surge from just over 17,000 to just over 42,000, which is almost a 300% increase. In the past 3 years, we've seen a 400% increase in chest reconstruction surgeries on trans kids. This also matches another study that showed gender-affirming surgeries nearly tripled in 3 years. But when we look at some of the individual states, the trend becomes even more alarming. For example, in Utah, they saw a 10,000% increase in girls getting sex changes. In addition, a Swedish study revealed a shocking 1,500% increase in girls claiming to be transgender in that country. However, with all this explosion of behavior and surgeries, we have to remember that you cannot have an epidemic of a genetic disease. But we will wait until our next session with child psychiatrist Dr. Mark McDonald before we discuss where this social contagion is coming from. However, it should be pointed out that even churches are being seduced by this ideology to the point that they are reinventing our faith and leading our children astray. Take a listen as this pastor leads her church in the Sparkle Creed, which is a prayer to a non-binary God and to a Jesus who had 2 dads.
I invite you to rise in body or spirit, and let us confess our faith today in the words of the Sparkle Creed. I believe in the non-binary God, whose pronouns are plural. I believe in Jesus Christ, their child, who wore a fabulous tunic and had 2 dads, and saw everyone as a sibling child of God.
There are no words to express just how ridiculous what we just heard is, but it does bring to mind a passage in 1 Timothy 4:1. The Spirit clearly says that in the latter times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. But how did this spirit of deception start? It's important to note that Walt never received any attention as a child unless he was cross-dressed, and that is something we need to hear. Indeed, much of this is happening because we haven't been paying attention to our children, but somebody else has. Deep pain is the only thing that would explain why a married man with children and a stellar job could destroy all of that, including his own body, simply because his doctor told him transitioning was the only solution to what he was going through. If you would love to hear more about Walt's story, please check out our interview with him on the Supernatural Junkies podcast, and you can find us wherever you podcast. Of course, we'll also release that episode on the Truth, Faith, and Action Alliance channel. One of the most memorable things Walt shared was how to talk with people who struggle with their gender identity. Here are some of the questions that Walt recommended asking. What caused you to stop liking yourself? What was going on with you when you first wished you were someone else? What was it about your dad or your mom that made you want to be them? Now you may be asking yourself, are there really that many in the trans community that we could reach? But did you know that Reddit, which is not a very popular social media site, has a board where detransitioners and desisterers can post their comments, and there are over 54,000 members. Not exactly the few or insignificant numbers that the New York Times would have us believe. Reaching them, as Walt shared, starts with love and protection from grooming. Otherwise, something as simple as cross-dressing a child can cause a lifetime of pain and confusion. As Christians, we need to understand their hurt and turmoil, but we can't do that if we don't share the truth about who they are to God. God is the answer because they are His children, and we are called to fight for them. Only since the supernatural revelation of Jesus has Walt been able to find a peace that passes all understanding. That is why we all feel so uncomfortable and inadequate when we compare ourselves with the ridiculous stereotypes of what we see on TV and social media. We know we will never become a social influencer, and that is why we must expose the false gods of beauty, riches, and fame, because they can never satisfy that hunger inside of us to know who we are. So check out Walt's website at waltheyer.com and sexchangeregret.com for links, resources, and articles related to all the struggles people have with gender identity. And if you're looking for more resources, here's a short list to get you started. You may have to pause the video just to take a picture. Within our alliance, Pastor Mark Culligan has been working to connect the sexually and relationally challenged to Jesus Christ through a ministry called New Hope Outreach. You can find out more about Pastor Mark and his ministry at restoredhopenetwork.org. Of course, you can find all of our information and videos from the Save Our Children conference on our website at truthfaithandaction.org. If you would like to help or you need help, please reach out to us at info@truthfaithandaction.org. If you can help us financially, please visit our website or use the QR code on the screen at the end of our video to donate directly. As we submit the remainder of this message to be accomplished by the Holy Spirit, we pray that our hearts do not forget the victims of this satanic agenda, because we are in a battle for the minds and hearts of the next generation. May God bless you, and may God help us save our children.
I'm Alex, and I'm super.
I'm Dr. Thomas Dozier, and I am also super. Hi, I'm Dr. Dennis, and I am the natural.
Hey, I'm Dr. Kevin. That makes me the junkie. Oh, yeah. And we are
the Supernatural Junkies.
And we talk about all the things that you can't talk about in the church today.
And I like to talk about strengthening your faith, conspiracies, and how everything on TV is programming you. I like to talk about how our Bible is relevant, whether you're talking about artificial intelligence, so-called aliens, or secret societies. By the way, I know what Dr. Cruz likes to talk about as well.
Spoiler alert, I like to talk about how current events are prophetic and exactly what our Bibles warned us would happen. Alex, what's your jam?
I like to talk about ghosts, aliens, demon baby, supernatural healing, you name it. Be sure to check out our 100+ episodes on places like Audible, iPodcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Just search for the Supernatural Junkies wherever you podcast. Also, don't forget to like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.